obviously, Carter, you've been here for, second week here and all that stuff, but I think that we'll get into the details about like what we've been able to accomplish thus far. But
Mhm.
I think it'd be important to let the people know, like where you're from. Kind of, I think on our initial call, it was rather interesting how you actually came into fruition to become a pitcher and like what took you to being drafted kind of in a third round, like rather quickly becoming this high-end prospect there out of high school. So go into a little bit of detail about
Yeah,
that.
yeah. I'm originally from Tulsa, Oklahoma. I grew up with two older brothers. I've got a younger brother now. Um, so we're 30, 29, 28, and then we've got a 16-year-old little brother, and we've all played baseball growing up our whole lives. Um, my two older brothers also played pro ball. My dad was a pitcher at Oklahoma State, so baseball's kind of been our identity for the longest time since I can remember. And um, see, I went down to the Woodlands High School. Started there my freshman year. Great school, great program. Originally, I was a third baseman and thought that I would go maybe play at a college program and swing left-handed and play third base. And then I started pitching my senior year, and we had a great team, and we got a lot of exposure because I think we had like 10 Division I signs my senior year, so we had a lot of scouts and recruiters coming to our games and stuff, and I always threw the ball well from third base, so I felt like I could pitch a little bit, and it ended up being a successful thing for me. Let's see. So all in the same weekend there, towards the end of my senior year of high school, um, we won the state championship. I got MVP of the state championship, and I got drafted in the third round by the Royals. Um, all in the same weekend. So that was a pretty good weekend for us, at the Woodlands. And I mean I credit all the guys on my team because I wouldn't have gotten the same exposure if we weren't such a solid ball club with good coaching and a good history of premier players coming from the Woodland High School. We had Paul Goldschmidt and Kyle Drabek, Jamison Tyone. So a a renowned program, and I felt like I was in a good spot, and I capitalized on the opportunity.
So I think that's actually rather interesting, right? The names that have come from that high school in particular. What was that like in terms of like playing in a program like that? Did you ever feel like any pressure or like to fill a void, right? Is the reason I ask that is because I come from an area where David Wright, the Upton
Sure.
brothers, Kadire, like even on the other ends of the spectrum of sports, Allen Iverson, Michael Vick, just like a ton of background in high level athletes,
Right.
right? And even just from one school in your
Yeah.
case, did you ever feel that there was like this notion that like, oh, I have to exceed those expectations, and even coming from like a family of like tremendous, background in sports,
Right.
to even then you following in like your family's footsteps of like being committed to Oklahoma State, like what was that experience like for you, like as from a freshman all the way to the point of you then joining the club, basically?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I think it's just a privilege, to be put in environments like that and to have, I think it's sort of a blessing to come from a family that has the passion and the ability to play the game of baseball at a high level. So I see that as a positive thing in my life. And then you go to a program, you mentioned names like David Wright and these guys that you've grown up admiring and looking up to, and it's just it's an exciting thing to kind of follow in those footsteps and try your best to kind of strive and want to be as good as somebody like that one day, and all your dreams and desires as a baseball player. So I think that it's a super cool opportunity to be at the Woodlands High School with, such an aurora around the game of baseball, and uh, and I thought that was a lot of fun.
Right. Now to that kind of last point, like there in high school, whirl emotions, I think for you, even transitioning to stepping on the mound like your senior year, was there ever any like, side bullpens that you ever threw in between the lines there to then like what was it like going to step on the mound as a pitcher there your senior year, something that you never thought would be your position of focus, kind of at
Right.
the next level and all that?
Well, it was, for me, without like a deep understanding of pitching and just like getting on the mound and just kind of just throwing it as hard as I could, like it kind of felt similar to playing third base. You get the ball and you just attack the zone and you throw it past people's barrels and then you go to a camp one weekend with Rob Walton at Oklahoma State, and he teaches you a slider in 3 pitches, and you start throwing that. So it was, I never really like grasped the idea that I was pitching. Like I kind of just got on the mound and competed and pitched to contact so that all the talented guys on the field could work for me. Um, but So yeah, it's kind of, I mean, it all just happened so quickly, when I started to pitch that I don't really recall like uh, a lot of thought processes going around like what it meant to be pitching for such a prestigious high school baseball program.
Right. So then, and then I'm going to put this in quotations, right? It's almost like delusional to the fact of like what's going on the mound, right? It's
Right.
like you probably went from, thinking that you're playing the next level as a third baseman to then like being on the mound your senior year and, obviously knowing that you're going to the next level, but having, I mean, you can attest to this, like, was there an expectation that like, hey, I would be drafted this year as a pitcher? And then what were those like basically walk that process of like from thinking that I'm going to the next level as a position player to then having this attention in terms of the draft, like how quick did that happen? What were those emotions when probably some in-house visits and all that stuff like
Right.
that?
Yeah.
How was that like for you from like a world of emotion standpoint of like this is real, like this is
Right.
what's going to happen?
So we had another pitcher on our team. He was going to TCU, extremely talented left-handed pitcher, low 90s. In the first 2 starts of the season, we threw back-to-back no-hitters, and so I didn't have a lot of recognition as a pitcher up until that point. But when that happened, scouts and recruiters and people with radar guns start showing up, behind the dish every single game and sending letters in the mail for to come play at their school and you start to realize that like your dream is sort of becoming an actuality and it's an exciting and thrilling feeling to know that like you're capable and you're putting in the work that's that's getting you to the next step in your goals of hopefully one day playing in the major leagues, like um, it's just it's a great feeling to know that like you can do it, and that you're talented and skilled enough, that and desired by these programs and major league organizations that want you to be a part of their team.
Right, which I think in essence, right, it's just like kind of going back to the delusional thought is just like you didn't even know like that this would be you and like
Right.
and now it's like you, right? And I think kind of bridging into like what I'm thinking about next is like you win the state championship, right? Then in that same weekend you're getting drafted in the third round. um, Obviously nothing that anyone's ever going to take away from you, which is sick. Like,
Mm.
people talk about like the difference between like, travel ball national championships versus a state championship. And I asked a guy that, and he said that there's nothing more fulfilling than like winning a state championship, right? But then you got best of both worlds, getting drafted in the third round, getting to chase the dream of the big leagues, right?
Mm.
Also getting paid quite a bit of money there, right? And I think talk about what that was like going into pro ball that summer, like experience going from college being relatively new pitcher to then like what that process was kind of like in your early stages, like 17 8 years 18 years old, right?
Right.
Just won a state championship, just got drafted in the third round. Like, man, what was that like for you going showing up in spring training complex and saying like, oh, this is professional baseball
Right.
now?
No, it was more than I could have imagined that it would ever be. Um, it was exciting. There was a lot of things going on.
Would you say, more on the lines of like the pressure of like fulfilling that like expectation to then like still maneuvering, being very new to the craft? Like, would you say that when you showed up, it was like, man, I'm here, it's great, to then like, what does this mean to you? Like from a career standpoint, pressure.
Right.
What is that? What was that like kind of going into that
Well,
setting?
you go from being, one of the best, in your area, in your clubhouse, in your sphere, to stepping into an environment where everybody looks just like you, and they're just as talented, if not more. And there's a lot of pressure of performance, and now this is my job, and it's not just something that I love to do. And then you sort of experience failure for the first time. Um, in a way, and you start to have to learn how to deal with coming back the next day after giving it up the day before, and something that you've never really experienced that much of because you've been successful and you've been winning more than losing. And that was a, a lot of new experiences for me. Um, and it's sort of a challenge, and that's when I started wrestling with my identity as a baseball player, and kind of the ups and downs that we go through if we're so sold out on what we do as players and athletes is where our value lies as human beings. And so that sort of you know sent me through a little bit of a spiral, and started to deal with you know some addictions, and these difficult situations that my decisions had led me towards, so that I could cope with like what it meant to um, you know fulfill my new role as a member of the Kansas City Royals organization, like, and not feeling like I was living up to the expectation that they might have had for their third round pick. Um, Not because of any pressure that they put on me, but just because of the pressure I was putting on myself, and and kind of a misunderstanding of value, and who I was as a person before a baseball player.
Right. I kind of bridge into that too and I think that we were pretty similar on that fact, right? Is that like out of high school, I was hearing the same thing about like the draft and that nature, right? In terms of like my senior year, I was, left-handed throwing 88 to 92,
Mm-hmm.
with not much like, size, a buck 59, like we talked about, right? Injury bug kind of caught up to me on that front, which led me into college, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which I think what happened to me was almost like that loss of identity as well, that you put so much pressure on yourself because it's like, shoot, now I'm at this big time program in the ACC, and like now I have to, rise to the occasion to not necessarily validate, but validate for me and like what I want to do. And
Mm-hmm.
it led to that spiral effect, right? And then there's the opposite end, like you alluded to, is that there's a lot of different ways that I feel that guys can kind of resort, and it's a real thing, right? You mentioned kind of the addiction piece to that came into your picture, right?
Yeah.
And I think it'd be like, what would you say, like, you found yourself in that process being like, when you found yourself struggling with addiction, like, did you feel that you were um, not necessarily untouchable in that facet, but like, what really resorted you to kind of go into that route and then realize what that did to you ultimately?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, it's a good question. I think it's a result of decisions that I started to make in high school, that were beginning to maximize themselves and show up in worse ways. And so, um, like, I started to smoke weed in high school, and that didn't seem like an issue, because my identity is in baseball, and I'm having success on the baseball field. And this thing over here that's going on in my life that I know is wrong because I've been raised with the difference of right and wrong, and I had great parents growing up, um, and I make those decisions because everything's going good over here and my identity's in baseball. And so it wasn't an issue until I get into pro ball. And I'm continuing to smoke weed. Now I'm getting drug tested. Now I'm failing drug tests. Um, and I'm starting to realize that there's a problem with the decisions that I'm making. And and for younger guys that were are maybe in the position that I was in, or maybe in a college program somewhere, I would say that like the decisions that we make today are the future that we're going to live tomorrow. And those decisions that we have create momentum in our lives. And the momentum that was carrying me from high school into pro ball was leading me down a destructive path. And by the time that I started to recognize that, um, it was difficult because I hadn't surrounded myself with positive influences. Uh, I hadn't considered who I am, like what's my character, what do I stand for, apart from just being good at throwing a ball over my head. Like what is my value as a human being? And so then you mix in the failure of early pro ball experiences, and then you fail drug tests, and you start to realize that there's an issue, but now you've kind of gone too far and you've built up some guilt and some shame, and the momentum is just leading you further and further away from who you want to be, uh, even even though the Kansas City Royals did everything they could to try to help you. Um, so I would just encourage young guys to surround yourself with positive influences, and consider the decisions that you're making today and how they'll affect the future that you're going to live tomorrow. Because we're so much more than just baseball players,
Right.
like we're sons, we're friends, um, we have innate value as human beings apart from just throwing a ball over our head.
Right, absolutely. And I think that there is like that balance between the two, right? And it's almost like we get lost in those things, and it's almost like the dopamine effect. Call it what it is.
Mm,
I would just call it the escape from like what reality is,
that's
and
right.
especially I think when you're young and you have like all of this momentum, like you alluded to, going your way, to then like experiencing failure in a way that is so escalated, like you just said, third rounder, having expectations of progressing through the organization to then make the big leagues at a high clip, and you're like, shoot, I'm failing like right
Mm,
now bad, not only from me personally and from a performance side, to then expectation, to then having this escape where I know that it's wrong, but it's giving me an escape from what the reality is. And I think like uh, what would you say, and I think that like you alluded to is like giving the advice to the next generation, like
mm,
what are some strategies that you found once you, let's call it what it is, like rock bottom, right?
mm,
Like when you choose that route, how to pull out of that? Because you could have done two things. You could have easily fallen in the trap and just said like, when the Royals kind of basically parted ways with you, right? You could have easily hung it up and then kept going down that path,
mm,
but you didn't, right? What are some strategies or solutions that you took that you think could help in terms of like guys at this struggle? Because it's going to happen.
yeah,
Gambling, drug addiction, spending money. Like another good one is like spending money on like others, right? To then
right,
go down that spiral effect.
yeah,
What would you say the best like strategy that you implemented to then what you could have done better in that
right.
situation?
Well, I think what I could have done better is you know um, work to change the first time. Because the Royals released me in 2015, and I did continue to spiral. And it did get a lot worse because of the momentum that was created. And the weed did turn into opiates and then eventually heroin. And I did eventually spend $500,000 in 3 years on an addiction to heroin and the lifestyle that comes with it. And and what I would say is that guys don't have to wait for it to get that bad. Not that I think everybody out there is going to go do heroin. Like, I think that was just uh, a result of the situation of my life and the decisions that I made. Like, that's not what I'm saying, but what I'm saying is that, um, like, it can get worse. Like, although there's not consequences today, like, that you can't live in the dark forever. And so, but ultimately, it did take me reaching rock bottom. And and that would be my advice is like don't let it be rock bottom that opens your eyes, you know, and lets you consider like kind of the things that we do on a daily basis that we know we might be better off without, or that we know aren't helping us in our baseball career, but we continue to do them um, because we're just trying to cope with this life. Like surround yourself with your team, with your family, with the people that God has put in your life to encourage you and support you and yeah, just I mean recognize your value as a human being, you know, apart from the game of baseball. Uh, and I think that would be helpful if that answers your question
Yeah,
at all.
yeah, and
Yeah,
I think it's just like important to like, label that, right? It's like I did get there, and you know, with that, there was a light bulb moment, right, for you.
yeah.
What would you say that light bulb moment was?
That light bulb moment for me, and I say it laughing now, it's not funny at all, but the light bulb moment was when I fell asleep at the wheel going 75 miles an hour on the highway, high on heroin and Xanax. You know, that was the light bulb moment for me. And thank God, like, I wasn't hurt or the people that I was with weren't hurt. But that was the moment that I knew that, like, something needed to change and I couldn't live like that anymore. And, and that's where redemption started to take place, and I started to lean into you know my identity as a son of God, and kind of start praying and seeking divine help, and putting myself around people that would lead me in the right direction, you know, and so that was January 1st of 2017 that my life totally, um, turned around, thankfully. Um, but it was the light bulb moment was a um, pretty rough situation, you
Right.
know. Um,
100%.
yeah,
I think, a common theme with just like the stories that I've heard and then like hearing you kind of talk about it is it's almost like there has to be like an admittance phase to it of like I have an issue,
mm,
whether it's to that extreme or not, of
totally.
like mental battles, to then like how you're taking care of yourself off the field, like on the micro level, which is like what majority would experience, right? And then it can go to the extreme. I think it deals with a lot with like admittance and then being able to ask for help, right? You're
That's right.
mentioning, turning to God and like however anyone chooses to do that is like being able to say like, shoot, like I'm doing this to myself, like I need help,
Right.
right? I need help.
Yeah. And
Um,
that's tough for men. That's tough for baseball players. That's tough for
right,
athletes. It's tough for people that grow up in a culture that says if it's gonna be, then it's up to me. You know, and I can figure this thing out. I don't need help. I don't need your advice. I don't need there's some humility that comes in that. You know, that says like maybe I don't have this whole thing figured out, and maybe somebody has a word of encouragement or support that would help me lead a better life, you know, or at least a more uh, free life, you know.
right. And I think sadly it happens more times than we think,
Right.
right? Or it like creeps into people's heads, etc. And like you just said, is it's kind of resorting just from like what your situation was. I think ultimately, right, is and when we're talking about like high performance, especially reaching to the pinnacle, right, we all know the percentages are very astronomically small to make it to not only play high school baseball at a high clip, but then to go to college,
Yeah.
to then even play professional baseball is so small, right? And I think where we get lost is that we leave ourselves open not only as like you just said, it's like men we're seen as strong, like oh we have the answers, and like no, we're just as human as the next person, the person who does have it figured out or even not. And I
Mm.
think the unique principle to that is that we, especially in the professional level, the judgment factor
Mm.
is that we, especially as a pitcher, we are on a hill on our own,
Mm-hmm.
And as a fan or reporter or even someone outside looking in, it's like, oh, you get paid X, Y amount of dollars to, throw a ball. It's like, but then we leave ourselves up for judgment all the time,
Right.
all the time. And there's no right answer to that,
Right.
right? You know what I mean? And was there, I think just like as a small question, was there ever like that kind of feeling that like there's not on top of pressure, but like just like the fear of being judged so much at like the level that which one you were drafted to, then probably how you were valued to the Royals organization.
Yeah. No, yeah, I've always considered myself a people pleaser, and I want to fulfill the role that I see myself in the lives of others, and um, so I wanted to do my job well for the Royals, and that was a lot of pressure. I don't know if there was any, well, I know there wasn't any judgment towards me from, them in any way other than they just wanted to see me get right and get well, for their sake and my sake. Um, but yeah,
Yeah, that
yeah,
works. Yeah, and
I mean,
like I said, the way that that happens goes in different ways for everybody, right?
yeah.
I think now, so fast
On
forward.
that topic though, like I
Yeah,
think because you alluded to like you get paid XYZ to pitch and like you shouldn't have we see it in pro sports all the times. Like guys are still facing the difficulties and the disparities that come with this life, and their position doesn't negate that fact. And we're so like I think just sometimes in we can cut this out if we have to, but like in the media and stuff when guys are so judgmental towards the performance of high level athletes just because they're wealthy or their status as you know um, puts them in this socioeconomic class. Like I don't think that gives us the right to see them as anything different than just human beings that are also suffering from the 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 difficulties that come with life sometimes.
right. And
Like
I think I firmly believe in that too.
yeah,
And like ultimately, what we are is entertainers, and we were fortunate enough to be very good at our job.
right,
It's just like what anybody does, whether you're a business owner to a salesperson, whatever job you are, you do it at a high clip. Like people associate money too much with like XYZ,
right.
right?
With
Of
happiness
right
too.
with
Like
happiness, right? And I think that what is entertainment ultimately? It's a way to separate, not only from personal life, but to have something to root for outside
right.
of just you. Right. And that's why I think we fall in love with the player, right? We fall in love with the player, the story, the journey
Mm,
because of those things is that it's a way to find motivation, but dreams, right?
right.
We're always told as kids that, um, like a common one, right? Like, oh, I want to be the president. Parents tell you, yeah, you can absolutely be that. But then as we get older, we're told no.
Mm,
Like we're told no, like like you got to find it, you got to go to college, you got to find a job, etc. And I think that performers ultimately find the other way. It's like, no, I want to chase what I love to do.
yeah.
And that chase and that dream is a testimony of what comes with that. Same thing with why you get raises in companies, why you're paid a certain way, is because there's the value attached to you and what you
Mm,
do, right? And I think that that sometimes can get mislost. So that is a good topic,
yeah.
yeah. Um, I think like a good way, kind of with where I'm going next with this, which I think that we could talk into is like just the differences between like pro ball or affiliate ball versus independent ball,
Mm,
right? So coming out of affiliate ball, what are some of the things that I can attest from the indie ball route as well?
mm.
What were some of those differences that you noticed? I always like find that interesting, like what guys think about it.
I think it's a little more hands off in the indie ball world. For whatever reason, I think that you kind of have in one way or another more freedom as a player to kind of figure out what your routine, particularly and how it works for you as an individual. Uh, Maybe just because guys are a little bit older at that stage. Um, compared to in affiliated ball, but a lot of freedom. It's kind of an enjoyment, you're back to just playing the game to play the game. Like there's a lot of fun in indie ball,
Yeah.
or at least I've had a lot of fun. I've met some great guys in the indie ball realm, and um, but it's still, you know, similar competition to that of affiliated ball. If not even higher at times, and on certain situational games, just because guys are more experienced, lots of at bats, but not. And there's a lot of similarities too. Like the schedule's pretty similar, the travel, um, somewhat similar with the bus trips, and um, but yeah, that's pretty much it.
Yeah, and I think the unique thing, like you alluded to a lot of like the autonomy, like in independent ball, right?
Hmm.
Is that what I almost found it was that it was way more cutthroat. What I mean by that is like, I remember my first year in indie ball, um, like if you just didn't perform, like there was someone else right there.
Revolving door,
Right,
just
revolving door.
yeah,
And whether it's right or wrong, I think it's like unique. It teaches you to grow up or like, hey, am I meant for this? Sometimes the switch a little bit quicker, right? As we know is that, development and performance is so up and down depending upon,
right.
a lot of different factors, right? And a question that I got asked a lot was, like I feel like a lot of people have this vision of indie ball as like misfits, if you will, or just like not very good like playing situations, like this, that, and the other. But I think you can look at guys like a Tyler Matzik and a guy like Rich Hill who
Mm,
revamped their whole careers going to indie ball, and I think a
yeah,
common theme, and even what you said, is that it was fun again,
yeah,
right? Baseball was fun, right?
right.
There's no pressure, right? Call it what it is, like the bottom of the barrel in terms of like where you would escalate professional baseball, right? It's professional baseball, it's just not affiliate ball,
Right.
right? And that question was rather interesting to me because I said, like, dude, it was like the most fun I've had playing baseball since I was in high school.
Yeah.
And like the talent level was through the roof. Like the whole bullpen was affiliate former arms, 95 plus. Like had
Yeah.
two guys that threw 100. Like
Dude.
it was just like there is so much talent in indie ball,
I
and
mean,
it's
Matt
only
Adams took me deep last year.
right.
I think he's got a couple World Series. Like, I mean, there's a lot of talent in the indie ball world.
It's insane, and I think that what it teaches you is just like to fall in love again with like the process, and like you're in control of you versus like someone down your throat of like, hey, this is how you need to do it. This is the regimen that you're gonna do. And there's layers, right? It's like obviously, we're in a relationship where, I am programming you on that front, but it's
Mm,
based on like what you do, not like
right.
what my vision of how the throw should be. It's
Yeah.
completely tailored to like what you do,
Yeah.
right? And I think that was interesting, just to kind of get your take on like indie ball versus like affiliate ball, which is
Right.
important. So I think even fast forwarding it further, right, is that you had a really successful winter ball season in Australia,
Yeah.
right? To then
Yeah. Indie ball's fun. Australia's more fun.
more fun, yeah.
Australia was a blast.
What
Yeah.
was so like, obviously like sub two ERA, bunch or strikeouts, figuring out like, that the blend between the split and changeup really
Mm,
did play for you. And it saw you smile there, like fun. Like
yeah.
I think we forget that like baseball is a game of fun versus like this pressure-filled notion of performance, right?
Right.
So what are some of the lessons that you learned in Australia, like alluding to it just being a whole lot more fun? Like
Yeah.
what was that situation like for you?
Yeah. I think I had probably um, I'm pretty routine oriented, and I enjoy, like, the patterns, and I feel like more ready to pitch when I go through my routine. But Australia taught me, like, do you be ready to pitch at all times, in every situation, and you don't necessarily need that routine to compete, and like you can just get on the mound and go get people out, um, and just kind of the the culture of Australia, and the slow pace, more casual, um, more free. Just I think all that is kind of embedded into the game of baseball in Australia. and that's something that I really enjoyed, was just kind of not a lot of pressure, not a lot of um, you know, I think a lesson that I learned in Australia is just enjoying the game again, and then the wins followed. I think we were 30-10. We played 40 games. Won a lot of baseball games. Great team, but it always seemed like we were just going to the ballpark with our friends, and uh, and then once the game started, you just compete to the best of your ability and do it with joy, and and the results will follow. So.
Right. And I think, and you alluded to the competitive nature and like wins, right? Like wanting
Mm,
to win, like showing up with a group that wants to win. And I
yeah.
think that, in terms of my downfall, like in my college career is probably where like I hit that bottom of like not good, right? And I found myself losing sight of that, of like what's like the ultimate dream, right? The
Mm,
ultimate dream is to win.
yeah.
And I also find that, interesting in terms of like the next level. It's like we should never forget about like what the goal is. We don't dream about, I've never seen millions of dollar contract in my hands, but I think
Mm,
the overarching theme is that when we pick up a ball and like swing the bat or anything in T-ball, like what do we say? We think about Game 7 of the World Series,
mm,
right? And I
right.
think that those things are powerful to always
Yeah.
remember. And when I finally got back to, that form, if you will, like feeling like myself again, like there was zero about, you know, how much money I was going to
Right.
make or, what role I was in. It was like, man, I just want to win.
Right.
You know what I mean? Did you find that being like a good unlock for you as well?
Absolutely. I think the desire to want to win, and also the desire to want to maximize your capabilities as an athlete, like to recognize the gifts and talents that you've been given, and to say, I want to do everything I possibly can to reach my ceiling, whatever that may be, whether that's $1 million contract or not, whether that's Game 7 of the World Series or not. Like, I think just recognizing that one, you're blessed to even be able to play the game of baseball, so why not just maximize that? I think that's where a lot of my enjoyment comes from now at this stage in my career. It's like, how good can Carter Ho be at baseball? And whatever that leads me to, like, that will be a satisfying experience. Because, you alluded to, I've never had $1 million contract in my hand, and I got a big contract out of high school, and I think we found out, like, I wasn't that happy. Like, I was using coping mechanisms, and I was had no idea who I was and what was meaningful in life to me, and I had the nice car and the money, and all of it was so empty, compared to um, kind of more of an idea of self-actualization, and how can I maximize my ability to play baseball and win at the game of baseball,
Right? Which, you mentioned, kind of that aspect in terms of the way that I think of living my own life truthfully is that like, money's obviously good, but like you just said, is that like just because someone has money doesn't mean that they're necessarily happy with
That's
everything.
right.
And for me, it's always about living a life with purpose and like meaning, and that's going to fulfill you more than anything that you could ever do in your life.
Absolutely.
And like everything else that comes with that follows suit, right?
Absolutely.
It's why I think we see, it happen more times than not. People with a lot of money struggle with some of those things, right? It's
Yeah.
not everybody. I'm not going to say that. I'm not bucketing that on that front, but it is a very real thing where
Yeah.
relationships falter, personal mental ability to do things kind of struggles a little bit. And that's when I found that like, dude, like we're on this earth like only once.
Hmm.
And like, why are we going to get wrapped up in the wrong things? And we're all going to. And I think that those steps, when we find it, is where it gives us that meaning. We find the purpose that we actually want to do. It gets our heart going, right? It gets
Hmm.
our juices flowing in the morning where it's like, dude, this is exciting.
Yeah.
And actually, one of the greatest things that I heard, like from a training perspective, was just like the day you don't wake up like freaking fired up and excited for what the day has is when you've probably lost sight of like your purpose and what you're
Mm.
trying to do. Um, so that's really interesting that you
Mm.
kind of even alluded to that in your own personal self as well. So you talked about as well, trying to find out. how good can Carter Hope be,
Mm.
even in the later stages of your career? Coming off successful, winter ball season in Australia, what brought you kind of to here at Shred? Selling out, devoting yourself to, um, like what we have, and then like versus, kind of the plan and vision that we have, which we'll go kind of next into what we've
Mm-hmm.
been working on. But like,
Sure.
what led you to kind of take that chance, take that leap of hope, kind of at this
Right.
stage in your career to be quite frank, try a new style of training for you?
Yeah. Just taking advantage of a second chance, at playing the game of baseball and at life even, like um I recognize that like uh my decisions could have led me down like a whole different, experience of life, and like now that I'm on this side of all of that, like I everything within me just wants to maximize the opportunity and capitalize on making the most out of the latter part of my career. And for me, when I was looking into um, what the best yes for me to make in order to fulfill that goal of maximizing my career, it was to come work with Tread Athletics, because uh, I see a lot of the posts and a lot of the successes that guys are having, increasing velocity at latter parts of their career, and developing new biomechanical movements on the mound that you want to do, but you've done things differently for a large part of your career, and trying to break some of those habits, and working with a coach like you to try to yeah, just move efficiently down the mound, because you know at 28 years old, like I feel like I can get more out of my body and throw harder, and so that's why we're here, because I think I've always had a good fundamental understanding of how to pitch. I think my changeup plays well with the fastball up in the zone. We're working on the new slider, and that's exciting. And um, so the concept of pitching, and the innings that I've thrown make me feel confident of my ability to do so. But now it's like, how can we get a little bit better, and how can we throw a little bit harder, and see what the ceiling of this whole thing looks like.
Right, I think that's like the cool thing about this place is that we uh, our mo motto or ethos, right, is that we want to rewrite the story, and
Hmm.
like you've rewritten your own story personally to then say like, how am I going to do that from a playing perspective, right? And then choosing us, or even in general, whether it was us or someone else, right? I think
Yeah,
that like being able to look back, and I always tell anyone this in terms of like pros or guys later in their career, it's like we talked about on the initial call, is that we don't want to look in the mirror and say like, what if I did something, like what if I tried this
that's
versus
right.
like this, right? And that regret alone, I wouldn't necessarily call that regret. It's a different question, right? But like you never want to look back on your career and regret not doing something, or regret doing something differently.
That's right.
And I think like in tenfold is that we're already kind of seeing some results quickly, like on your end, right? Previously only ever getting up to 87 like in a bullpen, and now like that's your sub max kind of thought, right?
Right.
To then getting up to 91 there before you came in here,
Yeah.
to then being able to sit 89, 90 in like your first high effort pennant here,
Yeah.
right? And there's layers to it, right? Is that the environment's different. I know that you kind of typically will be in the low 90s like outside, but what is that making you like in the begin? We're obviously still very early in this process
Hmm.
here, in terms of like your development and what we're trying to accomplish. But what are like some of the things that you're noticing, like obviously rather quickly, like exceeding even my expectations in 2 months of training, right?
Right.
What would you say has been like some of the eye-opening things to you about what's going on in our process now?
Yeah. No, to see the slight increase in velo is satisfying for me. To, s- but I'm seeing my body be put in positions that I haven't seen before. Like we talk about inverted shin angle, and holding external rotation, and I've always been a big toe pusher and quad dominant and not able to use my body fully on the mound. So like I'm more excited about like how those unlocks in my mechanics can hopefully eventually lead to even more velo in the future. But you know, to say 89, 90 in the bullpen going into the season this year, that's better than I've ever been and at this stage of my career. Like I'm pretty excited about that, you know.
Right, which is to me is rather sick, right?
Yeah,
It's like, you know, you think regression as you get older,
right,
but it's like I think in your case that we have so much untapped potential,
right.
and I don't know where that's going. I think it can get pretty damn scary once we get there and like really get things to become habitual and all that stuff like that within the delivery. But also like having an off season like with some intensity that we're going to drive like crazy, which is just only going to, I think, provide benefit for you and eye-opening things for you. So, you know, I think like the crazy part too is that, you know, this is my MO for the off season that I tell guys is that you want to show up reinvented, where somebody
Mm,
asks like they visually see that there's a difference here,
yeah.
and then that they want to know like what you did, not even from like a whether it's Tread or anyone, right? It's not a recognition of what this represents. It's a representation of what you did, right?
Mm,
And taking the information, running with it, applying it, even though that's different, right? Like plyos, all that stuff, the way that language in terms of like how you should move differently. It's almost like it's not an overhaul of delivery, but it's a rewiring of
yeah.
what you think about yourself on the mound.
Right.
And so like what in that facet has been the most eye-opening thing like this early, like with that outside of, you know, just like the mechanical adjustments in general, but like
Mm.
give me some insight into like what that seemed like for you so far.
Well, I think neuroplasticity is a great thing.
Yeah.
Like that we can actually change the neural pathways and affect the way that we've moved previously in a physical sense, you know. And because at 28 years old, you know, I recognize that you know you're not a 21-year-old prospect anymore. Um, it's to still be at the peak of your physical um, performance and coupled with like a an ability to apply a cerebral perspective to like really thinking about what we're trying to do on the mound um, is exciting for me, and taking all the concepts and principles that you're teaching me and that Treads helped me to sort of start to grasp um, and applying those on the mound is exciting for sure.
Right. So fill us in. What's the most exciting point that you're looking forward to this upcoming season?
Uh, Velo, man, you got
Yeah.
to throw harder.
Yeah.
Like I'm always excited to get back with my teammates and Lincoln and my manager there. Great manager, great guy. So I'm excited for the relational aspect of playing another season of indie ball in Lincoln. But man, from a performance perspective, you know, I think that this could be a really good year for me leading into the off season and capitalizing on all the things that we've been working on and like I said before, just seeing how good can Carter Hope be at pitching and reaching my ceiling, whatever that looks like, you know, moving forward here. So uh, Velo,
Yeah.
Velo, man, you got to
Yeah.
throw hard.
Yeah,
Everybody throws
exactly.
100. You
Exactly.
got to throw hard.
And I think the beauty about your situation, right, is that like even with untapped surface and in terms of like how you even got into affiliate ball, right? I think if we continue to untap things and like just make the stuff just that much better,
Hmm.
it's going to turn some heads in itself. They're going to be like, this guy's different,
Right.
right? This guy's different and better and
Yeah.
later in his career.
Yeah.
I think that warrants at least the ability to enter the arena and have the name thrown around again.
Right.
And
If
I
we
think,
can throw that slider we've been throwing
yeah,
in pins, then
Right, like
Then
someone with, only three pitches without even like some separation from like an off-speed perspective, like
right,
moving at a different angle, right?
yeah,
And we were able to add that pretty quickly, like the
yeah,
gyro slider there, and then I think like as you continue to get more comfortable, right? Like we talked about on the mound yesterday, is that as you start to gain that trust, the harder the
yeah,
result, the movement is just going to continue to improve, and then I think that alone is what people think they've seen of Carter Hope is just going to be that much different.
hmm,
And that's kind of this reinvention principle that I keep alluding to, is that there's always layers to the goals from a player's development plan and what they need, right? The goal here for you in the beginning was to, hey, we need to start the process of molding, better movement solutions there on the mound,
right,
to then say, look at the performance. Great year in Australia. How can we make it that much better, right?
hmm,
You came into it knowing that, like, I don't have a slider, it's not good, right?
right,
And we added that quickly, and we're going to see how that plays come live ABs, and then
yeah,
it's going to be even more intriguing to track over the season. And like, there's going to be some hiccups. I think that we should welcome those failures, those short-term
yeah,
failures, for the long-term success on that pitch alone, right?
yeah,
Just to make it's going to obviously help the other stuff too, because then you're not predictable, right? They're like, oh, okay, he's got a good fastball, good carry heater, up in the zone to very over the top slot with a changeup.
mm,
Oh shoot, he's got the slider and the cutter too. What do I do?
yeah,
It's gonna be harder for them to make decisions, right? Um, so I think like early on, I think I appreciate ultimately your openness to my ideas, but then like your ability to just say, boom, okay, I'm gonna do it, right? I'm just gonna get on the mound. I'm gonna work through these problems, and I want to make it happen.
yeah,
So Carter, thanks, my man, again for taking a chance not only on yourself but
yeah.
with me, man. And let's continue rewriting this thing. Okay. All
Sounds good. Thanks,
right, big
Paul.
homie.
Appreciate
Absolutely,
it, bro.
absolutely.